So when you think about massive fantasy books, what comes to your mind? What's that first thought? Are you excited that you're about to embark on a giant adventure? Or do you have some trepidations about, I don't know, that book looks kind of long? Hi, I'm Brian, and this is BellTube, and today I want to talk about 10 books that I've read that are just gigantic in the fantasy genre. I do have one exception, that's historical fiction, but we'll get to that. Before we get into this list, though, I want to share with you some blind spots that I have. These are books that I have not read, so that's why they don't make this list. That is like The Stand by Stephen King. Yes, I know you Stephen King constant readers. Please don't, toss tomatoes at me in the comments. I will get to it. I am very blind to Tad Williams. I have not read any of his books yet, so that will happen sooner or later. I have not read much of Malazan other than Gardens of the Moon, which I love, but that is not the largest of that series, so that's not going to be on the list as well. Lastly, The Wandering Inn remains a blind spot in my reading, which is odd because I am definitely one of the more pro-lit RPG people on BookTube. They're just really big books, and I haven't had the time to get to them. So that said, I want to share with you 10 gigantic fantasy books that I have conquered, that I've read, that I think you would really enjoy. And in order to make this list kind of more interesting, I'm only including one book per series, so we don't wind up with essentially an entire Song of Ice and Fire or an entire Wheel of Time video. What we're going to do is we're going to pick probably what I think to be the longest of the books, and we'll talk about those. That said, I'm going to throw a giant caveat in here, as I tend to do, and that's that word counts per book. Unless the author is very clear and specific about what their word count is, it's a little bit difficult to kind of suss out exactly what those word counts are. Sometimes you can go by page count, but the problem there is we don't know what the size of the font is. We don't know what the size of the margins are. We don't know what the spacing is. So that's really challenging just to kind of come up with an estimate that way. The best I could do is just do some simple research online. If I'm wrong, this is the perfect video to give me a, well, actually, Brian, you could do that in the comments, and that's completely cool. If I'm wrong on any of these, or if I'm wrong on all of these, you'll know a couple of things. One, you're on BellTube, which the information can or may not be correct. And two, I'm super willing and open-minded to go, hey, I may have got this wrong. So if you're in the comments, if you're in the BellTube community, you can absolutely let me know. Let's start with the first book on the list. And some of these I have physical copies of, some of them I don't. They're ebooks, and that's why I will show graphics over here. The first one comes in at 303,000 words, and it is Swan Song by Robert McCammon. I love this book. This is a standalone, and yes, it does get compared to The Stand by Stephen King quite a bit. Like I said, I haven't read that one, so I don't have a, which I like better analysis here for you. But Swan Song is awesome. It is a post-apocalyptic setting. It seems like it's a roundabout set in the 1980s when the bombs go off between us and Russia, and what the aftermath is from there. There are some mystical elements to it, which are kind of minor in a way, but at the same time, there's just enough to give it a real fantastical feel. There's absolutely some horror elements in here, which if I would have known beforehand, I might not have read Swan Song, because I am not a horror reader at all. I just don't like putting that stuff in my head. I don't know why. I'm not scared of books. I just don't generally, flock to the horror genre, but there's definitely horror elements in Swan Song. That said, I loved those elements. So huge recommend for me on Swan Song. It was actually my number 2 book of the year in 2023, 303,000 words. It's a big one. Let's go to number 9 on our list today. And number 9 is a book that I've read a long time ago. It comes in at about 310,000 words. I don't think it even came with a dust jacket. I think it came just this naked black hardcover. And of course, I am talking about Suzannah Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I read this forever ago, basically when it published. It's a really good book, and like Swan Song, it's a total standalone. So if these big books that I'm talking about here today intimidate you at all, not only because of the size of the books, but the size and the scope of the series. Here we have a book that's essentially set in kind of like a Victorian era where we are following a couple of magicians and what they're getting up to. I don't want to spoil it. It's not a book review, but yeah, 310,000 words. That's a pretty big book. All right, let's go to the next one. Number 8 is the final book in the realm of the Elderlings, and that is Assassin's Fate by Robin Hobb. If you watched my best, top 10 fantasy video last year, the realm of the Elderlings was number 1. Whether it stays that way or not this year, it's to be determined. It's not, locked in concrete. It's not in stone. But it's been my top series for a long time, and Assassin's Fate comes in at 392,000 words. This is a big book, and it is a big series. And really, if you've read a big part of the Realm of the Elderlings already, chances are you're going to get to Assassin's Fate. I don't see a whole lot of people. It does happen, but most people that get through like the second trilogy or the third trilogy, they persevere on through the entirety of the Realm of the Elderlings. But they're not small books. They are very slice of life books. They're highly character driven. They are very descriptive. If you like dialogue, you're going to get a ton of that, but you're not going to get tons and tons of action. So if action is really your thing, Malazan might be a better fit for you, perhaps Wheel of Time, but if you're a real character person, then yeah, you're hard-pressed to find anybody better at character work than Robin Hobb. 392,000 words for the last book of this gigantic series. I loved it. I've done videos where I've talked about the kind of book hangovers that I get after just very, what's the word I'm looking for, impactful series on me. And Realm of the Elderlings absolutely was. Assassin's Fate absolutely was that book hangover book for me. Let's move on to number 7, and that is Pat Rothfuss's The Wise Man's Fear. It comes in at 395,000 words. Now, I have no idea whether or not book 3 is ever coming out, but I'll share a story with you. I've actually read The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear each twice. Why? I read them on release, and then when there were some rumblings and hints that The Doors of Stone, I think is what the tentative title is for the third book, was coming out. This is a while ago. This is several years ago, long before I started watching BookTube, that book 3 was on the way. I didn't remember much about the first 2 books other than our main character, Kvothe, and I wanted to catch up. So I went back like an idiot and reread books 1 and books 2, thinking number 3 is right on the way. Yeah, right now it's July of 2024, and I don't know if it's ever coming out, but that's not the point of this video. We're talking about huge books, and 395,000 words for The Wise Man's Fear is absolutely that. Big honking book. Let's move on to book 6. And number 6 on our top 10 today. Yeah, we're going into the Wheel of Time. We are going to Robert Jordan's Lord of Chaos. This is book 6 in the Wheel of Time. I think it's the biggest book. These are a little bit difficult to track. There's some that say it might be second place, but for me, I'm just pulling this book because I absolutely love Lord of Chaos. I liked this book far more than the predecessor, book 5, and I certainly liked it quite a bit more than as we get into book 7, 8, 9, 10, which are more of the quote-unquote slog books of the Wheel of Time, which I didn't really mind nearly as much as most other booktubers. But yeah, 395,000 words for Lords of Chaos. That is gigantic. It's essentially kind of a tie with The Wise Man's Fear in terms of word count. But yeah, this is one that when you're looking at the Wheel of Time, and if it feels daunting to you at all, this is kind of why, because you get these books that are just gigantic tomes. For some of you guys, that's perfect, right? You find characters that you love and you want to be with them as long as possible. These series with giant books, they're fantastic. For others of you that maybe are more motivated by like reading a certain amount of books by each year's end, Wheel of Time is going to be tough, right? Because they're huge books and you are essentially giving up reading 3 books for every book that you're going to read in the Wheel of Time. Again, we're not here to do a review on Wheel of Time. We're just talking about word counts. 395,000 words. That's bonkers, but you know what's even more bonkers is our number 5 book. Now, before I talk about the book itself, I have to tell you it's 400,000 words. Let's see if you can guess the book. It's going to depend on how much BookTube you watch. It is published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. It is written by the one and only Brian Lee Durfee of BookTube fame. And yeah, we're talking about The Lonesome Crown. This is book 3 in the 5 Warrior Angels trilogy. I totally love this trilogy. They do some things in this book, I should say Brian Lee Durfee does some things in this book that I've flat out never read ever before in all of my years of reading. It's really cool. But the thing is that this book is deceivingly huge. Why? Because it actually sits on the shelf next to book 2, which is The Blackest Heart, and it's smaller in size physically than book 2, but it is definitely bigger in word count. The font is way smaller, the narrow margins on this book, it's just, I don't know, it's really kind of a trick of the eye. I don't know if Brian Lee Durfee is out there to trick us or what, but I'm all here for it. It's an awesome book. 400,000 words for The Lonesome Crown. So let's move on to number 4 on our list today. And this is almost a tie as well, but it's about a tie in the same series. I'm talking about A Song of Ice and Fire, and the book that I'm going to share today is A Storm of Swords. This clocks in at right around about 415,000 words. Now, there is some dispute, I don't know among who, but someone's disputing that A Dance with Dragons is actually bigger. I found that their titles are about the same as far as my research goes. I even went to my Sherpa when it comes to A Song of Ice and Fire, Jimmy Nuts, and I asked him, Jimmy, which is longer by word count, A Storm of Swords or A Dance of Dragons? And he wasn't even sure. Then I asked him, Jimmy, if you're not sure, and if you've got some extra time in the day, could you physically count each word in both of those books and then get back to me, with an accurate number so I can tell you guys, the BellTube community and brand new viewers, exactly which book is longer? And can you guys believe this? Jimmy told me he did not have the time to go through both of those books and count meticulously every single word within the pages. I don't know. It didn't seem like that big of an ask for me, but hey, I guess he's a busy guy. Yeah, Storm of Swords, 415,000 words. That's our number 4 book. It's sort of tied with The Dance of Dragons. Let's get into number 3. And number 3 is, I almost just tipped over a table, and with these books, I could have crippled myself. All right, book number 3, I talked about it at the beginning. We do have one historical fiction on the list. Of course, it's Shogun. You guys, 421,000 words in James Clavell's masterpiece, Shogun. I read it this year. It's going to be really hard for any book to top this for book of the year for me, but we're talking about book size and we're talking about intimidation levels. And I am here to tell you, this is not a book to be intimidated by. Yes, it's 1,300 pages. Yes, it's 421,000 words, but it is broken up into 6 sections. So if you want to do it like I did it and just read all the way through, go for it. If you want to do it like a ton of other BookTube people have done and just pick, one section, then do another section and maybe space it out over a few months, maybe even several months, that works too. You're still going to get to the end of the story and it might make it less intimidating for you to do. 421,000 words for James Clavell's Shogun. That's pretty crazy. All right. We are getting close to the top of the list. We're coming in at number 2 today, and this is a book that is 450,000 words. And the author, I think, is tricking us. When he came out with The Fall, which is the prequel novella to The Bound and the Broken, it's like 100 pages, right? So I'm thinking to myself, all right, this is digestible material. But Ryan Cahill's got surprises for us. Yeah, I'm talking about Of War and Ruin. It is 450-some thousand words. That is bonkers. And not only that, he's got so many POVs going on in this book. But in a way, it's crazy because there are no bad POVs, which is really, for me, incredible when you have a book that size. But also, the chapters are pretty short. So this book reads far faster than every other book on this list, which is crazy because this is literally the second largest book on the top 10 list here today, but it read the fastest for me. So if you are looking at the Bound and the Broken series and you're intimidated at all about the size of these books, I am here to tell you it's not going to take you as long to read them as you might think. The writing is super accessible. They are thrilling in terms of adventure. They are super interesting when it comes to character development. You won't find yourself bored at all. Highly big recommend for me on the Bound and the Broken. 450,000 words. That's nuts. All right, it's time to get to number one on the list today. I don't think it's going to surprise anybody, especially not who the author is. We are talking about Mr. Brandon Sanderson, and today we are sharing The Rhythm of War, which comes in at 456,000 words. 456,000 words. That is absolutely bonkers to me. I know I've used the word bonkers quite a bit today. Maybe I'll put that in the title. I don't know. But yeah, this guy just writes these epics in the Stormlight archives like nobody's business. And it's funny that I even own that book in physical because I have the first two books of Stormlight on Kindle. I bought Oathbringer on physical and proceeded one night in bed reading Oathbringer to actually manage to drop it on my face, which was about as unpleasant as it sounds. And so you would think that, I'm going back to Kindle for the Stormlight archives. I don't know why. I just thought Rhythm of War would look cool on my shelf, so I bought it. It's a big book, and, I think there's kind of mixed opinions on it. I know a lot of people like Words of Radiance the best. Some people like Oathbringer the best. I'm kind of in that Words of Radiance, Oathbringer the best category too. There are some aspects of Rhythm of War that I really liked. Here's the thing. 456,000 words. Do I, as a reader and as sort of a newbie booktuber, think it needs to be 456,000 words? Not at all. I think it's a little bloated. That's okay. We're all entitled to our opinion. If you are a giant Brandon Sanderson fan, you don't need to actually me about that part in the comments, because I get it. For some of you, it's just like the greatest book, and Brandon can do no wrong. That's all right too. I'm with you there in terms of following a favorite author that no matter what they do, they are your person. Kudos to you if you thought this book length was great. For me, it was a little overly long, but 456,000 words. Holy cow. Now, before we get way too overly long on this video, it's time to do one for the road. And one for the road today is going to be about the perceptions of these big books. And we can look at it as like big goals in life. But for today, I want to kind of drill it down into the practical a little bit and talk about big books. Because for a lot of people, they're really intimidating. If you watch a lot of BookTube, and chances are if you do, you've read some of these already. And maybe big books to you are no big deal. But if you happen to be a person out there that is just looking at books that are over 600, 700, 900, 1,100 pages, and you go, that just seems crazy to me. I'm here to tell you, you can absolutely do it. Start with some standalones. Start with Swan Song. Start with Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, because there is a feeling of accomplishment when you read a gigantic book and you finish that last page. If you've not had that feeling, it's really difficult to describe. I can only assume it's like a mountain climber for readers, right? So if you're a mountain climber or you're a rock climber and you get to the top of the peak of whatever you're climbing, there's probably, I don't know, because honestly, I would climb 15 feet, fall off and die, and none of us want that. But if I was a mountain climber, if I was a rock climber and I made it to that summit, I know that there would be a feeling of great worth and accomplishment and knowing that I had set a goal and hit it. I think the same can be said for big books if you are somebody that is a little kind of intimidated by the size and the scope and the epicness, because some of these books are pretty narrow cast. Some of them are huge casts. But if you can take a book and you can get through it, I promise you, you will have a sense of accomplishment, and it's fantastic. I'd love to know what some of your favorite big books are that you've read. I also want to know, what are some books on your TBR that you've put off for one reason or the other, but you know in the back of your mind you've put it off because of the size of the book. Leave that in the comments. And of course, if you've made it to the end of this video, I want to thank you for watching BellTube so much, because we get a fair share of people that watch really from the beginning all the way to the end, and it means a lot to me. If you've not yet subscribed to the channel, now's a great opportunity to do it. And if you can like the video, that helps more people see it, because YouTube thinks that, hey, lots of people like the video. Let's show it to some people who've never heard of BellTube before. Maybe they'll like it too. I really appreciate you guys being here. That's top 10 fantasy, gigantic, massive books that I have conquered. And of course, we send you out of here every time. Here's your fortune.